Devil, my friend. Fashion. Things to wear. Possibly faces covered, but more importantly, covering up the bodies. Merch. We have that now. We are very, very excited to announce that Vampire and the Devil have partnered with our friends at Rockin' Horror Apparel. They are now taking care of the actual merch, the exclusive merch for the Vampire and Devil podcast, modeled by our very sexy devil right here.
Oh, yeah.
But we have all kinds of goodies to share with you.
Got the hoodies. We got some shirts. We got some tanks coming up. We got some booty shorts. We got all the stuff you want to wear from the Vampire and Devil podcast, thanks to Rockin' Horror.
Horns up. Fangs out.
All right, Fangs and Infernos, you guys chose it as our beloved devil, and I have continued on our alphabets of horror. You guys know that is all about you, our beloved Fangs and Infernos. Now, that being said, you guys voted on it before where you wanted to talk about critters. You guys voted on it. You want us to talk about critters too. So we are going to do just that for you guys. We're going to kind of combine a little bit of course, the Vampire and Devil podcast as Devil and I break it down. And we're going to mix it with a little bit of outer space, a little bit of fuzzy balls rolling around with fangs. But even more, we're going to intersplice it with a little bit of Easter. I mean, I guess apparently, Devil, last letter C for the alphabets of horror was just an appetizer. So let's talk about the main course.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, when it comes to the critters, everybody knows I love critters. I've got the critters tattooed on me and stuff like that. I'm a huge fan of the original movie, but I would put this as a movie where I feel like I don't know, one of those ones we've always talked about, better sequels and stuff like that. And it's one of those ones where I was like, I don't know if I would go as far as saying it's a better sequel, but it's in that category of like when I talk about Gremlins and Gremlins 2. I love Gremlins 1. I think Gremlins 1 is the greatest one of the movies of all time. But Gremlins 2 is just more fun. It's more out there. It's more crazy. And I think about Critters 2 when it comes to it. Yes, Critters 1 is a more serious, more kind of horror film, more attack kind of film. Critters 2 is just more fun. I just love the fact that it's just, the Krites are talking to each other throughout the whole entire movie. They're like, it's got, pre-Minions and stuff like that. It kind of remind me of like Minions from, Despicable Me, but like evil version of them or stuff like that. So yeah, I've always loved this movie. And like I said, who doesn't love seeing an Easter bunny get a suit full of Krites inside of him and get to eaten alive, and then also who doesn't love a Playboy star? You get to see the bounty hunter change into a Playboy mate, and boobies and all, even to the point where and the greatest thing I love about that scene is the detail of like stupidness is that he even has the staple still in his stomach from watching, looking at it and looking at the magazine, and the magazine having that centerfold staple in it. I love the fact that that's still in it. But yeah, to the point where this movie was actually produced and the one and the only horror film to ever be produced by Playboy Entertainment, which is crazy. And then to bring it all back around, it's also directed by, someone that me and you got to go meet, and we got to go see him, and we got to talk to Mick Garris, gets to direct this film too. So as I said, I've always just loved this film. I always thought this was just a fun update to the Critters universe.
It definitely is, Devil, for sure, man. Because the other thing that's also really funny about that scene when it comes to the whole like Playboy-ness of it is, dude, in kind of a typical Playboy fashion, dude, they put a lot of emphasis on that morphing into a Playboy playmate. Like, there's a lot of camera, straight up Sin and Skin style on those boobs as they're filling out, brother, which is definitely interesting as well, man. But the movie itself, just like you said, I'm definitely with you. I would definitely have to put some thought into it on if I would 100% go this direction on a better sequel, because it definitely does compete. I really do love the original Critters, and I love the fact that the Fangs and Infernos picked that for us to discuss the first time, which makes this second time around a lot more fun as well. But like, it's definitely, like you said, it's definitely more fun because it's so out there. I mean, you've got the Playboy reference, you've got the Easter Bunny kills, the eggs themselves that when it comes to the Krites are so Easter egg-ish, which kind of plays into everything. And then just everything just down to like the way the landscape shifts for this. Brad coming back to town, people being like, oh, this is that character that was like, freaking out about Critters characters and losing his mind and going crazy about shit, all the way up to like the Charlie character returning, where, spoiler alert, sorry not sorry, depending on your guys' votes on how far we go with this series, but you know, Charlie's character is the consistent character throughout this entire franchise. But at the same time, bringing back Charlie's character to where he's doing exactly what he did the first time around, but is even that much more in depth, which is something I really love about the way that this movie plays out. Even just down to the end, and I'll only go as far as to say this until we get to it, the potential splice off to where do you have Charlie A or do you have Charlie B? Is just kind of a really, really kind of interesting and very unique way of writing Charlie's character in, because it's not uncommon for an actor to be very, committed to a specific character role throughout a franchise, regardless of how that franchise plays out. But I really do love the way that the Charlie character plays out throughout this franchise.
Yeah, for sure. And like I said, a lot of times, like the fun part that I like about this movie too is like, you bring in some of these actors and actresses that throughout movies, and to watch them again, I'm like, oh my God, I forgot that this person was in it. Like, you got Lynn Shay in this movie, who, is the
Yep.
one girl's mother who's running the thing. I mean, everybody loves freaking Lynn Shay, you know what I mean? She's like the queen of like comedy and horror films and things like that. But like the little girl that's in the movie that the grandma's taking care of, the blonde little girl, she's
Hmm.
actually she's the little girl from Flowers in the Attic,
Yeah.
with Christy Swanson and stuff like that that we're huge fans of. And even the love interest for for when he comes back into town and stuff like that she was in Rock and Roll High School Forever with Corey Feldman. She was the girl, the rocker that was playing the I think she was the keyboardist in Corey Feldman's band in that
Yeah.
movie. No, no, no. The keyboard. No, no. Never mind.
Not the
Keyboardist was the
keyboardist.
guy. She was the drummer.
He was the drummer.
She was the drummer. She was the drummer from Rock and Roll High School. But yeah, I'm like, oh my, I'm like, why does that girl look really familiar? And I'm like, oh, she's from Rock and Roll High School Forever. Nice. Oh shit. And then, like I said, even the little girl from, I'm trying to remember where she was from. I'm like, oh, she's in that. But yeah, this movie, like I said, I just love everything about this movie. I mean, the fact that, like I said, the Krites are all more comical in this movie. They're talking to each other. I love the fact that there's a big, huge crate, and you're like, "What the hell is this big crate?" And you find out it's that she transformed into the crate. So crazy.
Oh no, absolutely. And I mean, you've got like Tom Hodges' character, who was also in like Revenge of the Nerds, part two, which, there's just so many like cool movies that we're like familiar with, that like this whole cast is like, involved in. Like, don't even get me started on Lin Shay. Like, that is definitely an interview in the future that I think you and I need to tackle, because whether it's in person or even, whenever you and I set up a separate interview, that's definitely an interview that I could see going through like multiple levels, because like Lynn is just Lynn. I absolutely love her and adore her. But no, I really love the way that this movie is put out, because just like you said, it's a fun aspect for this movie. Like the idea of the way the critters come in, the way their eggs are kind of like they're kind of like being found and being like picked up. And of course you've got like the ooze coming out, like all that kind of like variousness as they're like making their ways and kind of like stalking everything out. But just kind of the idea of like having like a big over the top crate as like the main be all end all, while Charlie is still doing like Charlie things, like trying to figure out like how to like corral everything. And then like also the idea of like trying to do away with everything. Very, which also like you mentioned Gremlins. It had a very Gremlin-esque feel to it, where it's like we're gonna try to sucker all the Krites into this place, and then we're gonna try to kind of like blow it up. But they're gonna escape. They're gonna realize that that's not the way to do things until like Charlie's characters and Charlie's like spaceship comes in, and his self-sacrifice kind of the way to do things. It's just kind of very interesting like dynamic of like luring, trying to win the day, failing at it, and then kind of circling around on the back end there. It's just Critters 2 is just, it's like you said, Devil, it's just a really fun movie.
Yeah, I mean, even to the the scene when they go into the the fast food restaurant and the Krites are going in there terrorizing that. It just reminded me of a lot of the Gremlins in the first movie when they're in the bar and they're all
Yes.
doing different things and doing mayhem and stuff like that. To the point that like even I remember it, I hadn't watched the Critters one in a while. I mean, I'll go
Mhm.
back and watch it every so often. That I'm like, wait. In this one scene, I keep on forgetting that the big giant critter ball that they make in this that's rolling around wasn't Critters 2. I'm like, oh, Critters 1. So it's like I always love that scene where they're just all mixed into one big huge giant ball of critter just coming out of the barn. You're like, oh shit, that's insane. You know what I mean? To the point where it's like, yeah, that's what's so great about this franchise. And like I said, even going on more, who knows whether or not we're gonna talk about talk about Critters 3 or not. But just in case if we don't, I'm just gonna mention here how crazy it is that Critters 3 has Leonardo DiCaprio in that movie, you know what I
I
mean? And
know.
how big of a star he is now, he's in a Critters movie and stuff like that. So it's just cool, so cool, when you see some of these like old school horror films and these actors that are big huge actors now that are in it. But yeah, to me, like I said, I mean, the storyline of Critters 2 is basically just rehashing that old town, man. That town just loves to get attacked by these Krites constantly all the time. But I just really love it where it's like just Ugg losing his ability for a little while and going back to his normal face, and they're like, come on, and then like you said, ultimately in the end, end of the movie where Charlie sacrifices himself in the spaceship to take the big giant ball of critters out, and they're like, oh man, where's Charlie? Like, oh, he sacrificed himself, and we're like, oh man, everybody's all sad, and then they turn around and look, and Ugg just turned into Charlie, and you're like, oh, that's nice, you know what I mean? Because he reverted from being that rock star that he took from the first movie,
Yep.
and then ultimately when he lost the second bounty hunter, I can't remember the second bounty hunter's name now all of a sudden for some reason, but whenever he loses him, he kind of gets sad and reverts to his normal weird looking clay face and stuff. And I think it's a nice little thing for him that it's like, oh well, now that Charlie's dead, and I'll take Charlie's face, you know what I mean? Because he just means so much to everybody and such a good guy. And then you're like, oh, that's really really nice. And then all of a sudden, who comes trucking along in a with a parachute on the back of him, like, oh god, and then he's looking at Charlie. He's like, oh, you changed, and he's like, you're like, well, shit. Then which one's gonna be? And I mean, to me, I always felt that as a question when it came on to the other movies because you talked about Charlie being the only
Yeah.
character who was continued on to the Critters movie. It's like, well, is it Charlie or is it Ugg Charlie? You never really, you know what I mean? Sometimes
Yeah.
it's like you don't know who you're gonna get because it'd be kind of weird, But like I said, I love that scene where he's just like looking at him in the face, like, "Wait, why do you have my face for, man? Like, well, we thought you were dead, dude."
Right, because they're coming after the attempt of like blowing up the burger factory, and that doesn't really work. But then they're able to just kind of like smite them with the fucking like starship and stuff like that. But it's that same kind of like self-sacrifice thing. But yeah, it was that same kind of thing, and it's kind of like funny, like again, like you said, Devil, like the kind of like sorry not sorry, like spoiler alert kind of thing. Like, look. If I ever had the opportunity to meet Leonardo DiCaprio, despite what a massive star is, with all these amazing movies and the fact that he does movies like What's Eating Gilbert Grape that I absolutely love. I'm absolutely going to have him sign Critters 3 because it would be no different than if we ever got to meet like Jennifer Aniston. It's like, look, again, amazing movies, a lot of great stuff, but I'm going to want you on Leprechaun. Like, that's just the way it has to be, despite the
Are
fact
you
that
gonna
you want to
make, are you gonna
downplay it
make,
for all these years.
with that theory, are we gonna stalk Renee Zellweger and make her sign the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie that she despised for so long?
Of course we are, Devil, because that's not going to change the fact that when obviously you get to finally shack up with Drew Barrymore, we got to get her on something for Scream. You and I don't think we've ever had, and despite the people that we've met and the opportunities that we've had, I don't think you and I have ever gotten anything from the Scream franchise signed like ever. So, like,
Yeah, but even with Drew, I still wouldn't get anything signed from Scream. So it would be like, I would probably have to. To be honest, I don't. If I mean, if that opportunity would ever advance itself, I don't even know what I would even. I don't think I would even get anything signed. To be honest, I think I would just be getting arrested from stalking her and paying for like paying for like 10,000 photo ops and be like, wait, this guy again, like all of a sudden you just keep seeing me and like I'll just put on a different outfit, a different mask so they don't know it's me. But it's like, wait, this guy looks
just
like
a
he's been
different
here a couple
human
times.
face after a
Yeah.
different human face.
It's just like, wait, isn't this guy already been? How many freaking photo ops of Drew Barrymore do you have? Oh, I bought everyone. I'm the one. I'm the reason why it sold out. She can only photo op with me, like nobody else. And that's the thing about it, even with that, because that's the bad thing about with that being that Scream and us going to these cons and
Yeah.
doing so much that I feel like everybody she's one of those Scream autographs that is like a white, the white whale or the white elephant. She's the hard one to get. So if she
Yeah.
was to go to a con, everybody and their mother, and I feel like I would have to kill a lot of people because I'm like, screw you guys. You guys are 1990s, Drew Barrymore lover. I started at ET, told I was in love with her when I was a kid. So, so with that kind of stuff, yeah, I'm like, I don't know. I feel like if it came down to her meeting her, I'd probably do my like mortgage poster of stuff like that, but I don't know. I'd probably just like have a sign that says, "Will you marry me?" and then have her sign that, or say something like, "Hey, I'm into ugly dudes, and this guy is ugly, so I want him," or something. I'd probably do something stupid. I don't know. I'd probably be dumb, but yeah, I think with meeting some of these celebrities, yeah, I like to throw in the ones that are like the weird ones and stuff like that when we meet people and stuff. Yeah, Leonardo DiCaprio would be kind of funny. I'm pretty sure that, I mean, not that Leonardo DiCaprio has done cons. I'm pretty sure he probably hasn't done a con ever, and probably more than likely will never probably do a con. But in
Yeah.
the weird escape of, let's say he does do a con, I feel like nobody is gonna get Critters 3 to him to sign. I mean, it's all gonna be his big one. Obviously he's gonna get a ton of Romeo and Juliet. He's
Yep.
gonna get a ton of Titanic. You might get those ones,
That's
Basketball
that's
Diaries
where
or What's
Mrs.
Eating
Vamp
Gilbert's
would be.
Grape.
Oh yeah, Mrs.
You know,
Vamp would be all over Titanic.
yeah, there's definitely gonna be those ones that you're gonna go throughout and stuff like that. There's a lot of stuff, but I feel like somebody handing him a Critters 3 DVD, he's gonna be like, what the fuck? Like somebody actually know? I feel like it's like if you go in, it's just being with the critters. It's like going and meeting Jack Black, and you can pick anything you want to meet Jack Black. You can get him to sign School Rock or Tenacious D stuff or this movie, that movie. I'm gonna have him sign Never Ending Story 3. He's gonna be like, what the fuck? Out of all the shit that I've been in, this is the movie that you're gonna do. I mean, even Demolition Man, he's only in that movie for 2 seconds. You can get
Or
him
like
at
a movie, or even a movie like Orange County. Like
or,
I
or like
love Orange County.
Biodome. Biodome. He's only in the movie for a couple seconds when they're singing with Tenacious D. Like, even that would make more sense. He'd be like, "Who the fuck is giving me Neverending Story 3 to sign? Nobody wants me to sign this movie. Not only is Neverending Story 3 the worst of all the Neverending Story movies, and I don't care what anybody says. I love one. One is the Mecca, but two is still the shit. I still love two. Rest in peace, Jonathan Brandis. But I still love two. Three is a piece of shit. Yeah, three is definitely a piece of shit.
I had to
And
have it for my collection. It's right behind me on the shelf because I
yeah,
truly care about that franchise. So I couldn't not have it. Fucking one is iconic. Two, like you and me, absolutely amazing. The three, it just is what it is. I take it with a grain of salt, but I'm not going to have my collection incomplete. But dude, that whole storyline, that whole like trajectory of the whole like losing your memories, fucking awesome.
yeah. And then apparently down the street, I heard that they're doing it at the drive-in that's around us. That's the big drive-in that's like 4 hours away or something like in New Jersey. They're doing a never-ending story movie with
Yeah.
uh with a Falcor propped head. I was
Ah,
like, oh. I was like, dude, that'd be pretty cool. But apparently, like in Germany, some place has like the actual Falcor, like actual puppet that they like fixed up and stuff like that. And you can go somewhere. I think it's somewhere in Germany where you can go and actually see it. And I'm like, oh my god, I want to go there so bad.
oh,
I
dude,
just want to ride on Falcor.
Devil, I just saw something the other day, and sorry, Fangs and Infernos, but this is the last thing I'll say on the Never-Ending Story because trust me and Devil can go all fucking day on Never-Ending Story. But something I just recently read about Noah Hathaway is that apparently when he does cons or when he does appearances, he genuinely puts out a basket of dollars and he tells the fans to go ahead and take $1 if they ever had to actually get therapy because of the death of Artek in the original Never-Ending Story, which I
Yeah,
thought was one of the most amazing things I'd ever read. I was like, holy shit, because don't get me wrong, not only the death of Artek, but just that scene with like the werewolf, like the wolf character, like talking through the little archway. I mean, those are two of the deepest, darkest parts of that movie.
yeah, for sure. But yeah, I think it'd be fun, with the critters and stuff like that. So, going back to the end of the critters too. Yeah, it's funny. Like I said, yeah, it'd be one of those ones that like, maybe with Lynn Shay, it'd be kind of be interesting to get her to sign the critters too, because I feel like,
Hmm.
with her signing all the movies that she probably signs, which we know, for me, I'm probably gonna. I mean, I probably would have to make another poster because there's just too many movies that I like her in. But
Yeah.
I would definitely want Kingpin. I just love her in that movie.
Oh my God.
What about like having great sex just makes me want to take a shit? Blah, 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 blah. Just have her do. That's what I want. I want the photo op with me and her just doing that. Would be amazing.
You're
That'd be the
definitely
greatest
right.
photo op everywhere. But yeah, I feel like if you pulled out a Critters 2 DVD, because I mean, like I said, I mean, even when we met Dee Wallace and we've had her sign Critters. Critters is definitely one that's on a lot of radars where people will sign. People obviously, with D Wallace are gonna more than likely get, ET,
Yeah.
probably ET, Cujo is a big one. Obviously, anybody who like us who are Rob Zombie fans have gotten her, from Three from Hell and
Dude, that
things,
Greta
from
character is amazing.
yeah, from Rob Zombie movies. But I mean, she definitely has even on her table, she's got pictures of her from the Critters movie. So she definitely, lives that. Where you go see Lynn Shay, I'm not saying she doesn't, because some actors do have some obscure stuff on there. Like even when we talked about James Duvall, I mean, not only did he have a Doom Generation picture, two pictures, he had a Doom Generation like shirt that he had. I'm like, oh my god, especially because of being such. Such a smaller and more independent film, you wouldn't think that. But I mean, for his generation, for our generation, that's such a huge, cool industrial movie. But
Hell
yeah,
yeah.
I feel like Lynn, because she's been in so many movies and she's iconic, that she may have a Critters too, but I feel like she doesn't really. That doesn't get represented very much in her career. So I feel like that one's definitely more of like really out of all the stuff, this is what you want me to sign this movie? And I feel like it's gonna be, that's how it would be with, especially like I said, going to meet like Matthew McConaughey or Renee Zellweger from the worst of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies ever, that new generation, to get them to sign that'd be funny. But I mean,
That
I
movie
feel like
kept
I feel
me
like
from
it.
watching Texas Chainsaw Massacre for so
Yeah,
long.
I feel like I would do it depending on how much money they want. If Renee Zellweger was like $200 to meet, I don't know if I would go that far to be into the joke for her. But if she just happened to be at a con for like $50, I think I'd be willing to scrap, like, get like a couple of my friends and be like, hey man, give me like $5 because this would be the funniest shit in the world to get her to sign this movie. Because everybody's gonna have her sign, Legally Blonde and all the other 9 million movies that she's done and stuff like that, or not,
Oh,
well,
yeah.
not Legally Blonde, but that's the other one.
Not
But
Legally Blonde, but like Me, Myself, and Irene, and
yeah, Me,
like
Myself, and Irene, and all that. Yeah, like the big time comedy movies for
yeah,
her is
like
going to be the ones that.
Mrs. Vamp loves Legally Blonde, but that's Reese Witherspoon,
Yeah, that's Reese Witherspoon.
which is the
Yeah,
reason why I know that is because Mrs. Vamp is such a fan.
yeah. That's I switched the wrong one. But yeah. I just feel like, yeah, she's going to be like, what the heck, and then go. But it's one of those things where like, hey, it'd be fun.
Oh yeah, because with
I mean,
Lin
even
Shaye,
even even talking about it before.
especially with the success of Insidious, and of course, you and I have got a lot of alumni from Detroit Rock City, so Detroit Rock City would definitely pull me a bit as something to potentially have her sign. Like I might even consider having Lin Shaye on the next chance we have to meet her to maybe sign my 8x10 of Detroit Rock City that she's not even on, which is totally
Yeah.
fine, but like she's not even in that one just because we know that somebody like Giuseppe, who's just so off the grid, wouldn't be somebody who I'd be able to get on that. But again, between the DVD or of course the Detroit Rock City DVD or of course the whole franchise of Insidious, of which I am a fan, Mrs. Vamp personally thinks that franchise is stupid as hell. She's definitely a Conjuring girl, but like I like Insidious. I think it's pretty sick. So like that's definitely a direction that I wouldn't hate to go when it comes to Lin Shaye.
Yeah, for sure.
100% there, Devil, for sure, my friend. But since you and I are going in a whole lot of different directions when it comes to this particular Critters 2 breakdown, let's reel it a little back in as well, man. When it comes to Critters 2, man, how do you like the scoring for the obituaries, man? Because again, like we said, it might not necessarily be better than Critters, but it's definitely more fun.
When so I'm going to do my little spill for the very end. While I'm doing that, I need you to go on your device of things and try to remind us what we scored Critters 1. But yeah, to me, I feel like Critters 2 and Critters 1, like I said, it ultimately is about the same. And, I mean, I like both of these movies. I think both these movies are great. Like I said, I think Critters 1 probably might top as my better movie, just because overall it's a little bit more menacing, a little bit more of that, where Critters 2 I think is a more fun film, like I said before, like Gremlins 2, where I feel like, if you're asking me which movie is more fun to watch, oh, I'll watch Critters 2 over Critters 1. But Critters 1 has got that more feel to it. But I can't remember what exactly we gave Critters 1, so I'm trying to, when you figure that out, we'll
I'm working on it, my
I know.
friend.
I just because I don't want, like I said, I don't want to be like, oh, I'm gonna give this an 8.0, and then we gave Critters 1 like a 7 point something, and be like, well, yeah, no, it's not gonna be that extremely more blown over. I feel like I'm probably gonna give it about the same score. Maybe I might drop it
Oh
down a little bit
God,
more.
there's Rotten Tail.
Oh, yep, there's Rotten Tail. We know we gave that one. We gave that one the
We were good. We were nice when it came to Critters, my friend. We gave it a 7.5.
7.5. Okay, so 7.5 for Critters to.
Throw back to Critters mixed with our M3 of Trick or Treat and Strangeland.
Yeah. But yeah, so try to remember. So 7.5 was the Critters 1. So I mean, like I said, I mean, I'd like to give it a 7.5 too, but I feel like, you know, in the world of the Critters, yeah, it's probably not the best of the Critters films, but
Yeah.
it's got that. But it's like I said, to me in my heart, I feel like it's a more fun Critters. So I'm safe with the 7.0. I think a 7.0 is a good score for me for that because, like I said, I feel ultimately that it's just as good, but maybe Critters ones gets that extra one just because it's more of a horror film. It's got more, you started to like these characters, and these characters are from this film. So yeah, I think a 7.0 is a good score for it.
I'm definitely with you, Devil. I'm cool with that, my friend. Because, like, the fact of the matter is, like, I know the franchise just like you know the franchise, and I know where Critter. I haven't watched Critters 3. I haven't watched Critters 4, and what I mean is in a while. I haven't watched Critters 3 in a while. I haven't watched Critters 4 in a while. I've watched Critters Attack, and let's not even get into that one right now. But like, I safely can say that again, as much as it would be very cool to slide that movie in front of Leonardo DiCaprio, I do know that movie, and I know that it's not superior to
Yeah, yeah.
Critters 2. So the fact of the matter is, when it does come to Critters 2, again, it's got that fun aspect. Again, Critters is much more horror, it's more traditional, it's a little bit more polished. Critters 2 definitely gets into the campy factor. But I'm with you there on the fun factor, man. I definitely do like, and I get a lot of enjoyment out of this movie, Devil. So I'm definitely with you there, my friend. 7.0, I'm down for the cause, man. So that's the way it's going to be. Fangs and Infernos, that is the way that we are going to lock it in. A 7.0 on the Alphabets of Horror, second time around, and voted by you guys as a letter C, Critters 2, the main course. 7.0. There it is. There it shall ever be. As voted on by Devil, as voted on by me, and the fact of the matter is, it's our show. But we appreciate you guys, and that's the way it will be. Let us know down in the comments if we got it right or if you think we got it wrong. Do you like it more than Critters? Do you like it less than Critters 3? We want to hear from you. So that's the way, as of right now, that it will be a 7.0 for Critters 2 on the Alphabets of Horror for letter C. Of course, they're Fangs and Infernos. Please make sure that you're shopping with our friends Mark and Lizzie at Rock and Horror Apparel. That is the official merch store of the Vampire and Devil podcast. Devil and I have been shooting around some ideas for maybe some updated merch, but we definitely want you guys to make sure that you're supporting Rock and Horror Apparel because, of course, when they run deals, they apply in our store. So definitely keep that in mind by not only following us on our socials, but following Mark and Lizzie, Rock and Horror Apparel, on their socials. And then, of course, lots of love out to Twisted Vines for their horror decor. Our beloved friend Chris at the Buffalo Bill House. It's an amazing bed and breakfast now, an Airbnb. And then, of course, we've also got our good friends over at Brutalities. We absolutely love what they do. So many amazing flavors. And then bring it home with our buddy John, who owns the Salem Witchboard Museum and the Witchboard Museum of Baltimore. So make sure you guys are going out and checking out these amazing vendors and, of course, these amazing locations and keeping them thriving. So again, circling back around, a 7.0 for Critters 2 on the letter C or C, depending on how you're looking at me, for the Alphabets of Horror. We'll see you real soon there, Fangs and Infernos. We appreciate you. Horns up. Fangs out.
Hey, it's the Devil here, and we're going to talk about devil stuff. We're going to talk about 2015's Demonic. Have you seen this movie? It's got Scotty, and Scotty doesn't know that the house is going to kill him. Anyway, it's a cool movie. It's got a little bit of that paranormal psychology, a little bit of craziness in it. Got some ghosts, some found footage. It's got some crazy stuff. But anyway, it's got some cool kills. It's got some mass murder, some axe blood, some demon ghosts, some demonic stuff. All that kind of fun stuff. But anyway, you should probably go check it out. It's, it's alright. You know what I mean? Scotty doesn't know that this movie is, gonna be on my podcast, the Vampire and Devil podcast, because we're gonna talk about demonic stuff with the devils. Not every devil and not every demon is cool, and this one was, somewhat cool. It's got a cool cast, but yeah, the movie was kind of I don't want to call it a sleeper, but it was
maybe put you in a sleeper. Anyway, maybe you should go check it out. Because the devil said so, and the devil does what the devil does, and you're gonna do what the devil tells you to do, or you're gonna get the hose again, or something like that. I don't remember. Anyway, go check out Demonic 2015.
Devil, my friend, I think we should have a little quick conversation about everybody's respectful celestial abodes, where it be my little coffin, where I lay my head at night, or at times that you feel that you just want to go back down to make sure that hell's not getting out of whack while you are away. Let's talk about it. Vampire and Devil's newest partnership in Twisted Vines, our dear friends, Chris and Saren Cadaver.
Oh yeah, you like scary stuff, you like horror decor, come and check out Twisted Vines. They make all the kind of cool shit, all for your house, all kinds of scary shit. They love it. You like to bring back the horror, you want to scare your neighbors, you want to conjure up a friend to talk to, you want to conjure up somebody bad, you want to do some bad stuff to them, you go to Twisted Vines and get some of their merch.
Absolutely, for sure. Everything is completely handmade by them. So if you need a little friend, maybe a round set abode, maybe you want to conduct a little evil towards a friend that was a friend, maybe no longer a friend. They have voodoo dolls they can do for you to allow for such activities. But you know how much we love our Ouija boards, my friend, and they make all of those by hand. They took care of your beloved vampire with a nice Nosferatu board, but the devil, he happens to be a Munsters fan. And not only do they do boards as traditional rectangles, but they can put a little bit of coffin flair in them.
Oh yeah, look at that coffin shape monster board. Yeah, you wanna conjure up Mr. Herman? You wanna ask him how Pet Cemetery was? You can do it on this board. Oh yeah.
Absolutely, my friend. So again, thank you so much to Twisted Vines for partnering with the Vampire and Devil podcast, and make sure that you Fangs and Infernos are checking them out on their Facebook page, on their Instagram pages, and making sure that you are checking them out as they move around the country, showing their craft off at all of the various horror cons and oddities expos that they love to do. So absolutely, my friend, of course, man, horns up, fangs out for our friends at Twisted Vines.
Oh yeah.
All right, there, Fangs and Infernos. We are gonna get classic with you. Come on, you know there's never anything better than a classic vampire or the ever so classic devil. But we're gonna go into the realm of books with you guys, and this is definitely going to be a fun one. So when Devil and I were kind of talking about classic novels, it was kind of we could have gone a lot of different directions there, my friend. And the way we decided to go with it, Fangs and Infernos, is we decided to go a little bit of the obvious but not from the obvious, versus a movie that I just personally always find to be really, really well done, very well executed, and I definitely think this is going to be a good showdown. So what do you say, Devil, my friend? Let's talk a little bit about Bram Stoker's Dracula, starring Gary Oldman, up against The Picture of Dorian Gray, which has got Angela Lansbury in it. A little bit of 1992 versus 1945.
Yeah, it's kind of funny though too. And yes, for the Fangs and Infernos out there, shocker, the devil chose the vampire movie in this showdown. It wasn't, I know, he's done his Draculas and Nosferatus, and this basically movie is like, we've talked about this particular movie and story about 9 million times because of how many movies, we all the way back to even when we talked about Dario Argento and his Dracula movie. So, you know what I mean? But I mean, it's as far as, like I said, we've been huge fans, obviously huge fans of, Bela Lugosi's Dracula, all the way back from the, the black and white Nosferatu and stuff like that. But this has always been my favorite version of Dracula. I've always just really loved the story. I love the cinematography. I love the, the look, the scheme. I love, yes, Count Dracula. I love Gary Oldman in this movie. I think that's probably one of my favorite roles of his,
Definitely.
throughout his career and stuff like that. It's just a cool movie. And then, you go into, into that thing. And then Dorian Gray, we're gonna talk about that. Obviously this is the vampires pick, and I'm gonna be gentle but brutal. I've always been a fan of the story of Dorian Gray, but I'll get into my spiel of that when we get into that.
Yeah.
But like I said, a classic movie. I mean, like I said, yeah, definitely, you know, old school versus more, kind of old school, 90s movie versus,
Yeah.
40s movie. It's definitely going to be an interesting one. But yeah, like I said, I've been a huge fan of Angela Lansbury forever. So it's, I love that aspect of the movie. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. But yeah, I definitely just wanted to put it out there, that when you're going through and you're like, ooh, I wonder which guy chose which movie. Yes, you would think that the devil would pick Dorian Gray because it's very in that realm of
That's selling your
black
soul.
magic selling your soul kind of thing, and obviously the nail in the coffin with the Dracula one. But nope, the devil decided to trump him and took the Bram Stoker's because not only like I said, am I a huge fan of everyone that in that movie from the director to all the directors. I just like I like saying since I was since I inhabited this body as a young kid, I like saying Bram Stoker, and everybody loves a stroker, so not
Oh,
Stokers, it's Bram
yeah.
Strokers.
No, absolutely. And that is actually really the funny thing is. So I'll tell you there, Fangs and Infernos, when Devil pitched the idea to me, of course, that is immediately where my brain went. And I was like, yeah, but that's so obvious. And, Devil's definitely right. Both of us definitely see eye to eye when it comes to this movie. I mean, Francis Ford Coppola is so amazing. The cast is bulletproof, and everybody's performance is excellent. But yeah, the main reason I didn't go with this one is simply because I felt like that was so obvious, such a cop out when it came to this idea. And there's three specific books of literature that are my absolute favorite books. And those, of course, being Bram Stoker's Dracula, um, Sleepy Hollow, and The Picture of Dorian Gray from Oscar Wilde. Um, and even when Devil and I were talking, I really thought about rocking with Sleepy Hollow because we could really do a deep dive into it. And I really wanted to do that. But Devil also looked out for me when I was really aching for a Tim Burton episode. And so it was a little bit too like close together. Like granted, had we not done our Tim Burton episode yet, or if maybe we were currently in season 4 as opposed to season 3 while doing classic novels where real time had gone by, that's probably the hill that I would have died on in order to not pick the, of course, vampire book. But
Yeah,
I love The Picture of Dorian Gray. It's always been one of my favorite books. I'm very, very big on it, just as when it comes to literature in general. But
yeah,
also, then it's definitely going to be an interesting comparison because it's a very, very unique take. But we're going to get into that in just a little bit there, Fangs and Infernos, because we're going to start it off with Francis Ford Coppola, and we're going to talk about the Devil's pick, and that being right now Bram Stoker's Dracula. Gary Oldman, again, just like the Devil said. And actually, fun fact for you guys, Fangs and Infernos. So when the Devil and I were actually recently at Maryland Pop and Horror Con, we got kind of pulled aside by one of the vendors who was incredibly sweet. And Devil and I ended up getting some stuff of our own anyway. But they really wanted to get their name out there, and they were like, hey, let's give you just guys kind of a complimentary grab bag of these various prints. And we were like, yeah, sure, cool, thank you. And I just kind of made an off the side comment where I was like, oh no, we love all this kind of stuff. The prints look amazing. I'm a big vampire guy as we speak. And no sooner had those words come out of my mouth that it was like, oh, vampires? Okay. And they pick out a Gary Oldman print from this movie and put it in the bag for me and Devil. And we left with it. Devil went home to Mrs. Devil with this great Captain Spaulding House of a Thousand Corpses print, and I took my Gary Oldman print home, and that thing is already hanging up on the wall, and the very, very cool. So anyway, yes, just like the Devil said, absolutely my favorite Gary Oldman character and performance, bar none. I am very fond of his portrayal of Sid Vicious when it came to the Sid and Nancy movie. I do think he was excellent in that. And then, of course, for anybody who's unfamiliar, Mrs. Devil is very fond of Harry Potter, and he's a great Sirius Black. I mean, Gary's career in general is fantastic, and we haven't even gotten into Batman. Gary is just an amazing actor, so many amazing roles, and there's probably a Gary Oldman role that everybody can connect with somewhere and be a fan of. But yes, we are both very much Bram Stoker Dracula people when it comes to his portrayal, when it comes to this. Just the multitude of characters, the overall design. Again, amazing Francis Ford Coppola movie. It's got Keanu Reeves in there. It's got Winona Ryder. I mean, just like we said, Devil, the cast alone is bulletproof, but everybody's portrayals were really on point. And fun fact before I kick it over to you is I had heard recently in an interview that I saw with Keanu Reeves that Keanu is actually really not fond of his acting in this movie because he was really burning the candle at both ends at the time that he did this movie, doing a lot of different roles and so many lines, so much travel, and so many film sets. He's actually said straight up that he is not fond of his acting in this movie because he feels that he could see that he was tired and not phoning it in, but that he wasn't where he needed to be for this. I personally don't see it that way. Again, I'm not fully in that world. So I think his portrayal of Jonathan Harker was great. I personally have no issues whatsoever. But I did see recently that Keanu was not particularly fond of it. But fact of the matter is, bulletproof cast.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like I said, when it comes down to, even in the beginning when we were talking about that, if Vampire wanted to take, Bram Stoker, I probably, as far as literature, we were talking about shit. We wanted to go more classic kind
Yeah.
of literature versus like, going through Stephen King or any kind of books that have been made. But if he would have done that, I probably would have put it up against even though it's not really a classic, I guess, but I don't know. Maybe some people might. I probably would have done Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampire. I think
Yeah.
Interview with the Vampire versus Bram Stoker would be a cool, interesting
Definitely.
fight to see. I probably would. Not let us choose who would win that, and let the Fangs and Infernos choose. But yeah, I mean, like I said, to me, like the reason why, not only in this movie, do you have all the, like I said, all the actors and stuff, Gary Oldman, awesome. I feel like in this movie it's my favorite Renfield of all Renfields, with
Yeah.
with Tom Waits, such a crazy freaking actor. But like,
Yeah.
to me, I always liked this movie because I really liked the beginning of it, where you were like, you were a big huge fan of, and we both are, of like backstories and things like that. I really love the Vlad the Impaler kind of like,
Yes.
him going around and conquering and putting everybody on spikes and doing all that kind of stuff like that. So yeah, I love the fact that
I have them all.
yeah, they decided to go with that storyline of Vlad the Impaler and stuff like that, and then obviously he gets communication back in those days, or you send a letter or a horseman to go out, and it takes months and months and months later, he his wife thinks that he's perished in this fight, so she decides to take a 4,000-foot plunge off the castle, and basically by the time he gets there, she's dead, and he goes crazy and stabs a statue, which I guess you're probably not the best idea to do. I'm gonna tell everybody out there, if you don't want to become the very first vampire that ever been made, don't stab a statue in the heart and blood come out of it. I always thought that was a cool, interesting way of how they basically turned him into what would be traditional vampire kind of guy. And it's always, like I said, and especially with the storylines, it's always kind of been where Vlad was always kind of considered like the first actual vampire of the world and stuff like that, as far as like literature wise or people wise and stuff like that. I mean, you got a couple other ones throughout history, but I always love that. I love the fact that yeah, he's just and then you fast forward to a couple millennials, he'd been around and stuff like that. And I just love his character whenever he's just like Jonathan Hart, when Keanu Reeves comes over, he's just like, yeah, does all this stuff. But to me, I always loved the movie because I love the practical effects of it and stuff like that. It's so great. But I just love the shadow play that they've had throughout it, where like, he's over here and then his shadow is walking and still doing stuff. And then all of a sudden he's back over there. And I just always loved just the cool cinematography of this film because it's such a cool and interesting, view. Like even like I said, even when he's traveling in the on the boat and stuff like that to come over, and just like in even in like I said, even like when with him turning into what would be the rats turning into it, and or the big scene that everybody knows where he's the werewolf looking guy. And there's always been and it's to the point where this movie is what, 1991, I think, or somewhere around there was when this movie.
92, I think.
92, yeah. So, this movie's
92.
been 92, so this movie's been around forever, and yet there's still memes going around today, which I think is funny. I saw one a couple days ago and it reminded me of people wondering whether or not Gary Oldman's character, when he's the werewolf, if he's got a human penis or if he's got a red rocket like a dog.
That's amazing.
And I'm like, that's so funny that people think about that. But I'm like, this is a movie that's been around for 30 plus years, and yet there's still internet memes all about it.
I mean, considering that you and I are both big Kevin Smith fans, the first thing I had to think about was when Brody in Mallrats is talking to Stan Lee, and Stan Lee is talking about how he's just obsessed with superhero, like, body parts.
Yeah.
But no, absolutely, brother. When it comes to that, I mean, the story, it's so good. It's a really excellent, like, it's such a good arc, and that's always my big thing, especially in vampire movies. I mean, everybody hears me hark about it. I'm gonna hark about it till 1,000 years from now when I'm still bitching about it. Is like, if you're gonna do things, it's about the lore, it's about the style, it's about the overall arc of how you kind of explain everything. But I always really loved the way that this movie was done. I think Carrie Elways' character is really, really awesome. I really loved his character in this movie. And I mean, Anthony Hopkins's like portrayal of Van Helsing that I think is really, really good. I know it's a little bit of a comedic like a turn, but when it comes to Waits as Renfield, I'm with you. I think his portrayal of Renfield is absolutely amazing. But I really do have to give a shout out, and you and I talked about this in our parody episode. Peter McNichol's version of Renfield in Dracula Dead and Loving It, I will say, in my opinion, is still excellent. I really think, despite the fact that, yes, it is over the top comedic, because that's the point of the movie, it still shows that not thinking for yourself, obsession with the little lives, because you're only allowed to eat insects. It translates really well, actually, from both a serious portrayal in Waits's portrayal to a more comedic portrayal in McNichol's portrayal. And that's also something that I really, really love. But yeah, I love the way this story goes, the idea of how, Mina's character is portrayed in this, and of course Lucy's character, the whole Dracula's Bride. Shout out to Monica Bellucci, who my brother Vampire has always been a big Monica Bellucci fan, even going back to like not only Passion of the Christ, but even in the Matrix movie. I think it was the second one, Reload.
Yeah, I'm
I
pretty
think
sure.
that she was featured in, but whatever Matrix movie she was featured in, Brother Vamp really, really loves her in that. So he's always been big on Monica Bellucci. But again, I've always been very fond of, the Dracula's Brides characters. And that's actually shout out to our friends who put out the novelization series, Stoker Beyond, Dracula Beyond, because their way of doing these books, which I really love, so I'm going to take a moment to like plug the shit out of them, is the fact that they have all these Bram Stoker's Dracula books, but they're all books that are specific to a character and that character's backstory. And that's something that I really find very, very interesting and is a part of the market because, again, I don't, make any qualms or defense of the fact that when it comes to my kind, we are incredibly played out in so many different angles. You do not have to work very hard or dig very deep to find vampire anything. But when it does come to a specific book like Bram Stoker's Dracula, I love their way of doing every character with their own story and their own backstory. And I really did think that their particular novel that was dedicated to Dracula's brides was particularly excellent. So shout out to Beyond Stoker for everything that they do and Dracula Beyond. Those are all just amazing books, mini stories and everything in between. But back on point. I just love everybody's portrayal of this. Anthony Hopkins, like I said, as Van Helsing, I thought was a really, really cool portrayal, because you get a little bit of this back and forth over cinema when it comes to who is your Van Helsing and how do you like to see it. I personally like Hugh Jackman's character of more of a vengeful Van Helsing as a real vampire slayer as opposed to, not only, of course, Anthony Hopkins, but even, like I said, with somebody like Mel Brooks, which is less of a vampire slayer. While, yes, they are, it's still a little less of a vampire slayer and literally a bit more of a guide, more of an educational tool when it comes to the portrayal of the character. And Anthony Hopkins, again, is fantastic in these roles when it comes to an educational value. And that's something I really loved, especially when it came to his specific portrayal of Van Helsing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like I said, I mean, it's just like yes, like I said, with the when it comes to it, it's just a lot of my favorite ones. Like I said, all the obviously with the brides being in it, it's just my favorite version of them because I just love that scene where you know she's on top of him and then the other two just kind of come out of the bed. It's just a
Mhm.
cool shot. And you're just like, geez, to the point where even when he gets mad at them and they're crawling up on the, on the ceiling, backing away. It's just a cool scene to part, like I said, with Lucy. I mean, I understand, Dracula's obsession with Nina because her character looks like his deceased, wife and stuff like that. So I get that, but it's like, I mean, and no disrespect to Winona Ryder because I've always loved Winona Ryder, but yeah,
Yeah.
Lucy in this movie is just. I mean, I understand that she's always in the movie. She's the loose one. She's the free spirited one. But I just love her in this movie. I think she's like to the point when even when she turns into the vampire, she's just that iconic look with the white frilly
Yeah.
neck thing that she gets on until she loses her head. You know what I mean? But still, even when she loses her head, she still looks pretty good. We talked about high tension, how tension, and the truck driver
Yep.
getting a little head from the head. I would have still got a little head from the Lucy head to begin with. But yeah, I always like I said, I thought this was a cool movie. I love the fact that the Voyage of the Demeter that that movie that came out that kind of when it
Oh,
ended and it went into the Bram Stoker's version of Dracula when it goes so it's
so,
like that.
so good.
Yeah, yeah. So
Still,
like I said, like we talked about before, when with Doctor Sleep and stuff like that, when we talked about The Shining and things like that, when we talked about George Romero and or no, Stanley Kubrick episode, you know what I mean? It's like one of those ones where yeah, you can. I love the fact that this movie is taking, like the Voyage of Demeter is a movie. It's a prequel about that kind of stuff, but the voyage and all that stuff like that. But I love the fact that it does play into the Bram Stoker's, the Francis Ford Coppola version of the film. I just thought that was really, really cool to the point where, yeah, I just love a lot of the stuff. I love the fact that, I mean, the trope about vampires not being able to, be in the daylight, where they just kind of take
Mhm.
that and kind of go, okay, maybe, maybe they don't like sunlight, but they don't explode. Maybe they kind of lose their power a little bit, or they're a little bit like, more human, you know what I mean? Obviously he still has a little bit of his powers, because in the movie, he's obviously enticing, Mina. Obviously, there's the wolf scene where he's kind of, being able to talk to the wolf and stuff. But I mean, that kind of scene of him just walking in the daylight with that top hat, the
Yeah.
young version of Gary Oldman and those purple glasses, it's just a cool look. I mean, like I said, it's one of those ones. Oh, he's gonna pull out that one now.
I have, like I said, I have them all. I will say though, like all joking aside, like Devil was saying, the portrayal of the female characters is really, really excellent. And I will say, Funko, look, me and Devil do love you and all, but you definitely dropped the ball a little bit on some of those female characters, because you could have made some sick figures out of those.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But like I said, I just think that's such a cool, iconic look with just that, like I said, just the glasses and the cane,
Yeah.
the whole aesthetic and stuff like that, and him going to the pictures to see a movie and things like that. I thought that was really cool. But yeah, it's just a cool, like I said, it's just a movie. Like every time I watch it, find little things that I like about it more. Like every time I watch it, and yeah, it is kind of funny when when you talked about the Keanu Reeves thing, because it's like I get it, probably, like as him being an actor and probably seeing himself in that movie, he probably is like, yeah, I probably didn't give the performance that I needed to be. But like I said, for us, I always thought it was really good. I think it was one of those roles where even though he doesn't think that it was his best role, I think it's one of those roles that helped him more in his career than a lot of the other stuff, especially because he was so typecasted as like the, nerdy stoner, Bill and
Yeah.
Ted, he's an idiot.
Bill and Ted,
This
even
guy
into
isn't,
Point Break.
yeah, this guy is not a real serious actor. And then you see that movie, and that was kind of like, where you could see his more serious side. And that's like, yeah. And people thinking about it now, it's like, we think about it now, especially because, like I said, Bill and Ted is iconic. But if you think about the two huge movies that he has, when, in The Matrix and obviously John Wick,
Yeah.
that, in Hollywood, they were basically telling him, you're never gonna make it in Hollywood. You're gonna be this shit kind of actor, because obviously you're gonna be typecasted as the Bill and Ted type kind of guy, and then to see him now as like pretty much like the one of the leading men in Hollywood now is great, just to be like, hey man, just because just because you do these kind of roles, or you get typecasted for these kind of roles, because I mean all these kind of movies that he did, you know what I mean, like I said, he was, in that movie, he was in, what was the one with the shit? Now I'm trying to draw a blank, where he was dating the girl and had the kid. I don't remember, but he's always like this, like kind of fucking kind of dude, like that kind of movies and stuff like that. And like you see like this movie, like all of a sudden you see like he actually does have some acting chops and he can do things. So it is kind of interesting to hear like that he doesn't like his portrayal, and I get it. I've seen a bunch of interviews with with actors and actresses of being like, "Oh man, I hated myself in this movie. I was just not really good, or I was sick this whole entire time." I mean, a big one that I love, which is insane to think about it, because I'm being I'm a huge Monty Python fan. You know what I mean? But they're talking about how like at the time Graham was like a big huge like drug head and coke head and doing all this kind of stuff, and was sick, and like doing Monty Python while he was basically out of it the whole entire time. I'm like, that's crazy to hear about that, or like a musician that you heard like, oh yeah, I was on heroin and blacked out, but yet they're still playing their drums, or playing guitar and stuff like that. And it's just like, it's crazy
Maximum
to
overdrive, brother.
Yeah, when we talked about with that and stuff like that. So it's yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I get it as they when they see themselves, so like, oh man, I wish I would have done this better. Or I wish I wasn't sick, or I wish I didn't, have the way I looked at it. But like I said, for us, to me, like I think it's like I said, it's one of I mean, obviously like Bill and Ted and all that, but I still put that as one of Keanu Reeves's iconic characters because I really love his version of this because it's just like that will to try to get back. You know what I mean? Like he's being attacked. He knows something bad's going wrong. Realizing that these women are trying to kill him. He's got freaking Gary Oldman trying to kill him, and yet he's just finds his way, gets found by Bulgarian women, village people that bring him back kind of to life and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, his journey in this movie is like one. You want to think about all the characters that are in that movie. Everybody kind of like puts him aside, but that dude went through a lot of shit in this movie.
Yeah. No, he definitely did Devil for sure. And that was also something that I love about this movie, and I have to address this since you brought it up, of course, anyway, is that one of the things that I always go particularly crazy about, of which I have gone fucking batty about it on multiple episodes that we've had that have any type of vampire movie that we've discussed about, is when you have something that in theory violates vampiric lore, is are you showing your work behind it? Like when I was absolutely destroying, well, we were absolutely destroying Vampires Lesbos over the fact that these vampires are straight up sunbathing by the pool. Now, the thing I did like about this movie is while the average vampire fan would look at something like this and be like, but how is Gary's character able to walk about? And the fact of the matter is that is something that they're able to, you know, that they are able to cover, and they do show their work in that, where it's the idea of if you have the proper coverage, you're not going to be able to spend all day out there, but there is a certain amount of there is a certain amount of time that you will have in this, because also, for what it's worth, a lot of people also forget the funniest thing about vampiric lore when it comes to the whole sun thing is the fact of the idea of mirrors and reflections, not just with vampires being seen or not being seen in mirrors, but is the actual reflection of a harmful product. You hear all this, you see all this stuff about us being out in the nighttime. You got to remember the reason why you see the moon is it's reflecting the sun's rays. And that's always something I found to be particularly funny that never really gets addressed all that much. Is the fact of the matter is, it's like, yeah, we don't want to be out there getting pummeled by the sunlight, but we have a certain tolerance to where there's a limitation to what we can take. That's why I also enjoy movies like Near Dark, where, yeah, they show my brethren burning, but if you've got at least enough coverage in certain aspects, then you're able to at least tolerate until it builds up too much. But that's enough of that. Anyway, back on point as we move towards the obituaries is the fact that I love the idea of, again, the gratitude in the explanation in showing your work. And then as we move down towards the end, I've always also just loved the end of this movie. A really nice flow, that conflicted lovers, that whole leaving your world behind for a life you're not going to get, but understanding that there's a real centuries old, connection with, again, somebody that you're not going to give your life up for, but you can connect with on such a deep level, and all the way down to the whole. It reminds me a lot, honestly, of Cronenberg's The Fly, when you get to that very end moment where Jeff Goldblum's Fly character cannot take it anymore. He just asks Gina Davis to just get it over with and kind of put him out of his misery, is very, very similar to this particular portrayal, to where Mina still has a life to live, but she's not going to be able to live it with Vlad. That's just not the way it's going to happen. And ultimately, freeing him to be able to finally live the life with his lost love, and she being the one to allow him to do that is something I always thought was portrayed really, really well in this movie, where it's very difficult and there's so much back and forth on whether or not a film adaptation of a book can really stand up well. I do think, and I do feel this about the other movie when we get into that as well, but I do feel that this movie did a very, very excellent job at understanding the line between people who are so passionate about this book versus the people that are so passionate about what this movie is going to be and the people that can really ride the line.
Yeah, for sure. You know what I mean? Like I said, it's one of those ones where it's like, yeah, it's when it comes to books and novels and stuff like that, it's what it's definitely up there as one of my favorite adaptations of it, because it's such a, like you said, it's such a cool story arc and stuff like that. It's more, it's more than what people think. When you look at even like you go through any of the Dracula movies, even the old school Bela Lugosi one, it's got a little bit of that feel to it, but this one is, for some particular reason, it gives you that more love. You know what I mean? And it's like, and even the people when they say, like, they joke around where I want to find a love like, Morticia and Gomez or something like
Yeah.
that. People use that. People use like that, trope where that's like, yeah, I want to find somebody who would look at me and love me like, Dracula did, in this version of it. Cause like, he's like you said, he's willing to, sacrifice everything to be with this woman because he feels like, it's, the spirit or reincarnation of his, of his lost wife and stuff like that. It's just a cool movie where it's like, even with her, she's just like, I want to be with him, and then I want to be with Harker, and then I really want to be with this guy. And even when she meets him, she falls in love with him and falls in love with his character as the young version, but she doesn't realize that this, the young version that she meets is the same monster that's in her dreams all the time, that's haunting her and going after her until like towards the end when she finally realizes it. And yeah, he basically kind of, he gets the absolution back where the I guess the blood of the statue kind of reverses and goes back in, and they kind of, I guess what can be considered as maybe God unforsaking him at, to a point where it's like, okay, yeah, he's suffered enough, a long enough time with this curse, and him damning me, or damning my choices and what I did, to the point where it's like, yeah, he's willing to sacrifice all that. And you're like, well, yeah, if you're willing to sacrifice all that, it's kind of like I always joke around with, like, when it comes to things like the end of Constantine, where like the devil's like, "Oh, you're mine," and then he's like, "Wait, why are you not mine?" And you're like, "Well, yeah, because I self-sacrificed myself, and that puts me self-sacrifice basically kind of puts you in the good graces of God. That puts you in the heaven and stuff like that, because you're sacrificing your life for somebody else's life, and not in a suicidal way, or like because the damnation in hell, but like that sacrifice of, I'm willing to give my life to save this person's life, is considered a godly thing to do, or something like that. So I always loved that, where he was like, well, okay, I'll let him have you, because I know eventually, Constantine, you're gonna do some shit that's gonna be bad, and you're gonna come back to my side eventually. You know what I mean? Where it's like in this one, where it's like, yeah, he's kind of got that like redemption arc, which you don't get kind of in the other versions of Dracula or any like vampire ones. You don't get that like redemption arc, that like,
No.
yeah, he didn't choose to, Gary Oldman's character as Dracul, he didn't choose to be this monster. He just was so pissed and disgusted that, this god or this being or whatever like that would take away his wife, take away his life, that he basically just damned, because like, people don't realize that, in that version he was a huge religious person,
Oh, yeah.
even though he was going around and he's conquering these people, and he's fucking, putting people in stakes and, sticks and shit like that. He was a devout, religious person, you know what I mean? And then to give your whole entire life for something, and then them to kind of take your whole entire life away, which was his wife. He was like, fuck it. Yeah, I denounce everything, and then not a good idea. You know what I mean? One of those, you learn, you learn and learn. You know what I mean? But yeah, I always just loved that version of this in this movie, and then even in the book, where it's just like, it's just a cool adaptation of like, yeah, this guy, obviously, you know, as a human being to begin with, Vlad probably wasn't the greatest guy in the world. He was a conqueror or something like that. But I mean, I most of the stuff that he did that would be deemed evil was just because he was a badass conqueror. And what other way to tell people not to fuck with you or your country or your area than to put, heads on sticks and people through sticks and, impaling people and stuff like that. I mean, if the things in Infernos don't know exactly what the impaling caused, you can watch in the beginning of the movie. But I did a report on it years ago. Yeah, you're basically shoving a big, large wooden stick through the butthole, out the mouth. You know what I mean? It's not very. It's and just leaving these. I mean, like the stories of Vlad. You just left those. Like there were hundreds and thousands of heads that were rotting and bodies that are rotting and people like, oh my god, that's disgusting. How could he live like that? Well, yeah, he that was further away in his castle. I mean, I'm sure the stench had to come into eventually into the castle. But if you were some castle owner somewhere else and you came over to there and you seen that, you're like, yeah, I'm not fucking with this guy. That's that intimidation, kind of like like when when you see like the Samoans do like the little haku stuff. It's all about intimidation. That's his intimidation. So Vlad was really never really a bad guy until eventually, like I said, he gets his, he gets in Dracula gets his, you know, basically life taken away from him, and like I said, then he's curses and then he has this curse, and then he's dealing with this curse and. He's got an insatiable, thirst for blood, and he has to be evil, and he needs to do it. But then bringing Winona's character back, and he kind of regains his humanity, and at the very end realizes that, yeah, I can't live like this. I can't do this to someone like that. And yeah, it's just a cool, story arc for a character that is considered what's supposed to be a bad guy in this movie, but ultimately, like, yeah, he does some horrific shit in this movie, and he definitely, took liberties with Lucy. I mean, as much as she probably consented, I'm not sure if she consented completely to everything that happened to her. You know what I mean? Like, I'm pretty sure she wouldn't mind Gary Oldman giving it to her, but big giant scary werewolf dude was probably not in my cards of who I want to get down with. But yeah, like I said, I always just love the the beauty and it's obviously like, I know we're not in a romantic shit, but it is a very romantic movie. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
It definitely pulls the strings. It's a Valentine's Day movie. It's a movie to go take out the wife and the kids to go see this movie and see Red Rocket come out.
100% for sure. No, and that's just something that's always been very big into our culture is like there's a lot of romance when it comes to our culture and stuff that doesn't get as much into it because the whole kind of like blood sucking and lust and murder does tend to take a little bit of a front seat as opposed to the romantic back seat. But that's more details for another time. Obituaries there, my beloved devil. How do you like this movie, man? Bram Stoker's Dracula. It's a good one.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, it's one of those ones where I'm like, I want to give it a 10, but I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't know if I can give it a complete 10 just because there are other movies that I feel are a 10 that we've talked about or haven't talked about. Obviously haven't talked about because we've been trying to, when we do these things, we try to stay away from the big, huge movies that we know are going to be a 10. I mean, I know if we did I know we did with Stanley Kubrick movie, but if we ever did a showdown with Clockwork Orange is going to be a 10. More than likely from the
10.
both of us. It's gonna be that regardless. It's one of those ones where it's like, yeah, if you did Rocky Horror, we're probably gonna talk about Rocky Horror at some point, but we're not gonna put it in a showdown against anything. We'll probably just do like a combo thing. Because that's just a 10 out of 10. That's just a movie that I can't see anything wrong with it. I don't go as far as that with this film, but I definitely give it. I almost want to say I'm probably going to give it the. I mean, I'd have to go back and see some of our ones, but I don't know. I think as of right now, from the movies that we've talked about, as far as giving ratings to, it's probably going to be the highest rating that I've ever given. I'm going to give it a 9, just because I just love this movie
Yeah.
so much. It's such a great adaptation. I love the storyline, the cinematography. It's one of those movies. Yeah, it's made in 1992. You know what? 35, 34 years ago and stuff like that, and still looks amazing, still is a great movie. Yes, it's a long movie. It does have a little bit of slow burn, but it's not a slow burn where it annoys you, where it's like, ugh. You're invested in the story, you're invested in the time, and it's just like I said, it's just an iconic movie where it's like, yeah, I mean, obviously, like I said, we're huge fans of Bram Stoker's Dracula, which we did, and we gave that a good score. And obviously like Nosferatu and stuff like that. But to me, like I said, other than Interview with a Vampire. But Interview with a Vampire, for me, I love the movie, but to me, it's not as good as the book. I'm a more of a book guy versus, but I mean, I do love the movie, and to me, I feel like Bram Stoker's is one of those ones where it's just as good as the book. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
one of those ones where like you couldn't have done it any better. Like I said, to me, it's yeah. And like I said, I'd like to give it a 10, but like I said, there are only a couple of movies in the in a realm where I can give exactly 10 to it, but it's to the point where it's not 100% perfect of a movie. There are things that,
Yeah.
that maybe could have been a little bit better, maybe could have been done a little bit different, maybe could have done that, but not very much. And like you said, even with Keanu not liking his performance, it hinder it, and it's just like I said, it's just such an iconic movie that like it's just, I mean, even when it comes to somebody else redoing it, like when we talked about, Dario Argento and doing it, it's one of those ones where it's like you can remake Dracula 9 million times. You can remake it, you can do it like that, but you're not gonna beat this version of it. I think this is the into all in best version of any Dracula, film. Maybe not vampire film in general, but just the Dracula story of that, stuff like that. It's one of those ones where, yeah, I mean, between, like I said, between the book and that, it's crazy. It's ridiculous how stupid good this movie is.
Oh, it really is, Devil, and I'm 100% with you, man. And 9, it's going to be 100%. No, totally. Like if I'm being put on the spot, like right now for 10 movies that are 10s, it's my own personal list for my own personal reasons, but they're going to be movies like, Rocky Horror Picture Show, you know, Lost Boys, um, A Clockwork Orange, and like, though, like, and that's like going to be like part of my Mount Rushmore of 10s, like, and Beetlejuice. Like, if I'm being put on the spot, like right this second, for movies that I just think are perfect movies for whatever the reasons are. And again, it's my list, it would be my hill to die on, but it's going to be something like, Lost Boys, like I said, Clockwork Orange, Beetlejuice, and Rocky Horror Picture Show. Because I can tell anybody for hours, or even just for the simplicity. Give me an hour and I will be able to tell you each movie exactly why I see it this way, so on and so forth. But anyway, yes, when it comes to Bram Stoker's Dracula, it is right up there. And also a throw out too, what I think is easily in my top 3 of like modern vampire movies, like vampire movies that have come out within, let's say, the last 5 years. Last Voyage of the Demeter is so high up there. I think
Yeah.
that movie was dynamite and executed in every perfect way. It would be I've been dying for this, man. Come on, all of the cons that Devil and I support. Give me some Javier Botat to come over there, dude, because that dude's gonna get some money from me. Because not
Yeah.
only do I damn sure need that dude to sign my Last Voyage of the Demeter because I'm a crazy person for that portrayal of vampiric lore because it was amazing. But man, do I love me some Crooked Man. So I would absolutely need that dude on my Conjuring too. So come on, cons that Devil and I support, please get us some Javier Botat to enjoy on this. But absolutely 9.0, I'm 100% with you. It's man, is it up there? I could even probably make an argument for that 0.5, but I think 9 is obviously high up there. The only movies that I can think of off the top of my head that are in that ballpark, and again, you and I would easily be able to tell the Fangs and Infernos exactly why we feel this way, was when we were talking about Killer Clowns from Outer Space and we were talking about Antichrist, which I think were like 9 and 8.5 respectively, but they were definitely both very high up there when it came to that. But that's the way it's going to be, Fangs and Infernos, for Bram Stoker's Dracula. It is going to be a 9.0 in agreement between myself and the devil. Now, getting into its competitor, again, this is going to be a very, very tough one. Now, ultimately, I think Devil and I are on the similar wavelength when it comes to the end game of this. How we see this movie probably are going to be some differences. This movie, not only film wise, but storytelling, acting, and overall cinematic portrayal, is one of my very favorite films out there, especially if I'm looking at specifically very old timey movies, like when you and I did Black Sabbath against White Zombie. The way that this movie was done, I love it top to bottom and always have. I love Angela Lansbury's portrayal. I love everybody's acting in this movie. But the other thing I really, really love about this movie is their very specific choices and when it was appropriate to use color. And that's what I really love, particularly about this movie. It's a black and white movie, first and foremost, to let all you Fangs and Infernos know basically what the deal is with the picture of Dorian Gray is it's about this young kind of like, like what do they call them? Like not debutante, that's like the female version, but this, like aristocratic like nobleman who he's a beautiful young man, he's a very handsome person, he's considered very, very high up, and he gets into this, for lack of a better term, kind of deal with the devil in like a voodoo type way of a very beautiful portrait that is done of him, that where he is able to make an agreement where in order to stay as this posh beautiful specimen, it's the painting that actually ages. But that also leads into him having mental health issues when it comes to how he sees not only his friends, but his family, the way he carries himself when it comes to ego versus like actually respecting the people around him. And then ultimately also leading into murder as, his secrets start being like noticed. But I love the idea of this movie where you only see 4 times in this whole movie is when they actually use color, and they're always when it comes to how the portrait is done. The proper showing of it, the original ugly version of it, the follow up after a specific murder that we'll get into, and then the ultimate finale of it. I just have always really loved this movie. Again, I'm very passionate about the story. I've always been a picture of Dorian Gray fan. I love the acting. I love the overall cinematography of the movie that is shot, and I love the splicing of the color for a movie that was done in the 40s. Ultimately, it's going to be a very, very tricky sell to a demographic nowadays, but for people that are very just old school film addicts, I think this movie is very strong.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, to me, like I said, I've always liked the story of Dorian Gray. I think it's just a cool, interesting concept. You know what I mean? As far as like you said, this guy who basically, like you said, sold his soul. His paintings getting older. I mean, obviously he's killing people and keeping himself young and all that. I always loved it. Like I said, I like this version of this film. It's, I mean, as far as like full on Dorian Gray, I think it's the best Dorian Gray film as far as what, look wise. Yes, they made multiple versions of this movie throughout the years, and I still think that this one, as far as visual wise and storytelling wise, and like you said, that cool concept of it being an older film in the 40s and it being black and white, and that only time doing color is makes sense because it's, the center church of this, it wouldn't look as beautiful as being in black and white. You need that full color of seeing what you would see. You would see this painting and just be like, oh my God, like going to see the Mona Lisa or something like that. This painting is just so gorgeous and beautiful that, it needs to be not black and white, which makes things kind of bland, I mean, not saying that, they made this movie in black and white because they want to do it wasn't Kevin Smith making a black and white movie. You know what I mean? It's in the 40s where most movies were done in black and white because color at that point was almost obsolete and kind of new, but it was really super expensive. I mean, I just like, you talk about like the amount of money that like something like Wizard of Oz did with the Technicolor and making all that kind of stuff where they started off black and white and then obviously gets to Oz and it's like and that just blows up the film so much more. And it's always been like that. Like I said, I love Angela Lansbury's character in this movie. Like I said, I've always loved her. But I mean, as far as Dorian Grays go, there's only really, I mean, like I said, I've always loved the story. I've always loved the concept. But to me, I just found like most people who have portrayed Dorian Gray have just been annoying. I just never like all the movies, even in this movie. The only person that I've truly truly loved that did Dorian Gray and he wasn't even a Dorian Gray movie. It was Penny Dreadful. I love Dorian Gray's character in Penny Dreadful. That is honestly
Yeah.
my favorite concept or showing of Dorian Gray. And like I said, he was only a minute character for a couple episodes, and I just loved his concept with that. Where like I said, and like I said, that's not bashing this movie. I think that like we were saying, even when we bash Vampire Lesbos, which we talked about in nauseam when we were talking about it, it's considered a gold standard of erotic vampire movies. Even when as much as we bashed about now this is gonna be kind of funny, but even as much as we bashed about Rotten Kill, it's considered
Yeah.
a high standard of what's an Easter horror film. Not saying there's
Yep.
a lot of Easter horror films out there. That's the reason why it's a gold standard because there's really not that many out there. I mean, to me, honestly, I think the gold standard. You want to call it an Easter movie? Fuck you, want to call it an Easter movie. Die Hard is a Christmas movie. Critters 3 is an Easter movie, and I think Critters
It
3 is
is.
way more superior than Rotten Tail is. I will say
Absolutely.
that is the epitome of Easter films is Critters 3. I mean, come on, man. You got Lin Shaye, you got freaking Leonardo DiCaprio, and you got a guy in a Easter suit getting killed by Krites. That is the number one Easter film. I don't care what anybody says. But like I said,
You can make an argument for Mallrats, and I
I
mean that
mean,
in like
well,
respect. I mean that
well,
like
yeah,
in
exactly.
jest,
I
but
mean, Mallrats, it has that, the iconic scene with the Easter Bunny. Yeah, but I mean, like I said, so just because something is the epitome of something doesn't always mean that it's great. And that's how I kind of feel with this movie. I consider it, yes, the epitome and of Dorian Gray stories, movies. Like I said, other than the Penny Dreadful version of it, but I've always just found this movie just kind of bland, boring. You know what I mean? As much I've
yeah,
always loved the story, And like I said, I thought, but it was just one of those ones where it was always really tough to kind of watch. I've watched it a few times, and like I said, it definitely is the better of it. I would watch this Dorian Gray over. That's why when I asked you which Dorian Gray you were doing, you
Oh yeah.
chose this one. I was like, dude, I'm so glad because as much as I'm gonna bash this one, I love it more than any. I mean, if you had me watch any of the other Dorian Grays, I would be hardcore bashing that because,
Oh, and
like I
I
said,
no, and so would I, because like I know my Dorian Gray, like right over there. If I find a Dorian Gray movie, I buy it. I found one on Amazon not that long ago that I threw into my cart for like $3 or $4 just to get me free shipping on stuff I needed to get for the house. And I already knew the scores of this movie on things like IMDb and whatnot, and I am not expect. I will watch it because I always do, but this was a for my collection and enjoyment of Dorian Gray. But absolutely, no, I'm with you, Devil. It's one of those things where I definitely get you on that. Even something, and I will say this: as much as people love to just beat on League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, I personally, again, it's been a minute since I've watched that movie, so maybe maybe I'll kind of check it out again and reinvest a moment of just kind of checking it out. I remember liking League of Extraordinary
yeah,
Gentlemen,
I always I found it a fun movie.
like, and I do like Dorian's character in that
Yeah,
movie all the way down to when they use his Achilles heel, because they do use his Achilles heel in that movie. Um, I personally I like the way that Dorian is done in that movie. But yes, there's definitely lots of Dorian Grays out there that are by no means something that you would willingly attach your name to. There's, the Picture of Dorian Gray more recently movie. There's a movie called Dorian
Dorian
Gray
Gray.
that
Yeah.
came out not that long ago that I I wanted so much to like that movie. I felt that the concept and their thought process on the story was really good, but everything about the execution was just a train wreck of epic proportions. But no, absolutely. So this was definitely one of those things. And that's one of the things that made that I felt would make, before I even knew you were to pick Dracula, um, a particularly interesting showdown, because I don't personally think that the Picture of Dorian Gray, just in general, gets enough love and coverage just in the realm of horror, whether
Yeah.
it be novelization or just horror films. I really passionately do believe that we owe Oscar Wilde and the Picture of Dorian Gray a lot more respect than we give it. So that's that. But yeah, it was definitely one of those things where, with putting my eggs in the basket when it came to this particular choice, it was only ever going to be 1945's Dorian Gray, because it's like picking a Lizzie Borden movie, to be honest. That's not, and again, it depends on how you want to look at it, but if it's not Christina Ricci's, She Took an Axe, or Elizabeth Montgomery's from 1975, you will lose in epic. It will be a flawless victory. And while I think the Fangs and Infernos can figure out where we're going with the end, I don't find this to be a flawless victory in any facet.
No,
But
yeah.
if Lizzie Borden, I think, is a good just overall comparison when you're looking at franchise of a character, where it's like, look, when it comes to, if you're going to talk about Dorian Gray, you're gonna either have to go with this movie or League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, or you're going to have to go with She Took an Axe, Lizzie Borden Took an Axe, or Lizzie Borden with Elizabeth Montgomery, or you are just going to get laughed at, because those are nostalgia gimmick movies. And I would know I have them all. That's for me though, that's money well spent because like everybody knows my love affair of Lizzie Borden, that like for that collection, that's a passion project of mine. So that's again, I'm not going to spend 25, 20, 25, $30 on some random Lizzie Borden DVD that I know has a 2.5 rating. Yeah, you're not going to get me on that. But when I can find something in a price range that I know is worthy, I'm going to, of course, add it to my collection. But that's enough of that. Anyway, back on point when it comes to this. I definitely get it, Devil. I understand. It is one of those things where, you could go different Dracula directions and have a quality, solid conversation on it. You don't get a lot of options when it does come to the picture of Dorian Gray.
Oh yeah, I mean that's definitely one of those ones that's on there. When we talk about, when we talk about the literature, films and stuff like that. Yeah, it's definitely one that you can kind of think. Obviously, like the big ones. I mean, I obviously went with Bram Stoker, which is definitely a big one. But I mean, you can go with Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I was thinking about maybe doing that one with with Robert De Niro's version and stuff like that. We obviously just talked about Frankenstein with with the new one that just came out.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean. But there's other, there's like, I mean, obviously, when we're talking about more classical, but you can kind of and add like any of those kind of books and stuff like that to the point, like I said, Stephen King's, Anne Rice's and all that kind of stuff. But I definitely wanted to do more classical, which be considered late 1800s, early 1900s kind of writings, with that. And like I said, I was actually, surprised because like you were saying, even though we both are, fans of this, yeah, I feel like when it comes to those classical ones, when you think about, obviously Frankenstein and Dracula, that Dorian Gray doesn't get the love
Yeah.
of that most people would think of a classical, story, a classical novel and stuff like that. And I'm like, and like I said, even though, you know, I feel like this movie version of it, like I said, as much as I like it, and I think I'm not, it's not dissing, that it's the book and things like that. It's just crazy that like it's such a, like I said, it's such an interesting story. It's one of those ones like the Mary Shelley, like not Mary Shelley, but like Bram Stoker's with his
Yeah.
version of Dracula, and this version of it and stuff like that. Where I've always felt like it's just a cool concept and story where it's like more people who are into horror and into like the psychological kind of horror and things like that would be more into Dorian Gray. And that's the reason why I kind of feel like I wish, like I said, between this one, like you said, with League, I always remember League of a Gentleman. I remember that one kind of like always getting shit on. And I
Yeah.
was always like, was it a great movie? No, it wasn't the greatest movie, but I always just remember sort of liking it. It's one of those ones like I
Me
haven't
too.
watched it in years, so it might be one of those things like when we talked about Cursed and you kind of remembered it better differently than
Oh,
we rewatched it again. I kind of feel like League of the Gentlemen. It's one of those movies where I vaguely remember it something that I enjoyed somewhat. Was it the greatest thing? No. And I kind of feel like that with Dorian Gray. Like I said, other than which even Penny Dreadful, that's 10, 15 years ago when that series was on television. I feel like there needs to, when people are going around, maybe it's a ploy, with all these Del Toro's coming out and all these people remaking these, the Bride of Frankenstein's and these these old classic horror films. I think like we need somebody out there that is a really good director, really good writer to make a good remaking of Picture of Dorian, because I think it's one of those ones. I feel like it because I mean like to kind of go off tangent for a second but kind of come back on tangent. I'm a huge obviously with novels, I'm a huge Ray Bradbury fan. I'm a
yeah.
huge Fahrenheit 451. That was one of my favorite books to read when I was in high school, mainly because it had a lot of swearing in it and we were allowed to swear when we were reading it out. But it's just a cool concepted book with a movie, a book about it, people burning books and banning books and not doing all like that. When you watch the two movies that at least as of right now that I know that are specifically about that movie, you have the old 50s or 60s movie that's so freaking cheesy and horrible. And then they came out one a couple years ago that had, I think, Michael B. Shannon is in it and Michael Shannon in it. And I really love that version of it. So it's one of those ones where it's like, it's a cool story. And yeah, Ray Bradbury's got a lot of good stories that get picked up and put into movies and have been adapted from his books to movies. But I feel like, like Fahrenheit 451 was one of those ones, like, it's such a good book. Why hasn't somebody made a good version of this film? You have, like I said, that version, the old version. There probably had been TV versions that I never saw, but it wasn't until that one where I was like, oh shit. And it's the same thing I feel with Dorian Gray. It's one of those ones that's like, we're talking about a movie obviously made in 1945, so you're looking at like fucking 60, 70,
Eighty
almost 80,
years.
yeah, 80, yeah, 80 some years ago, 81.
81 years.
Yeah, 81 years ago this movie is made, and that in a story like that everybody has done. There's like we said, there's been a ton of them before that, but none of them have the quality that
Yeah.
that it deserves from the book, and it's crazy.
And if I get I'll even put this out right now for the Fangs Infernos to enjoy, that if I get the opportunity, whether it's an email or just a social media message, or if, by my own good fortune, because I've made no hesitation or secret of how much I love this guy's work and his style, man, if I have it my way, please give me a Robert Eggers version of
Yeah, Robert
Ulysses
Eggers,
Grant.
maybe like a Del Toro,
Or
one of
even
those kind
or
of
even Del
guys.
Toro. I think Guillermo definitely gets it. If I had to go with an old school director, no questions asked, it's Guillermo del Toro. But you give me like a new school guy that's already shown that classic literature and kind of, gothic style. Oh man, do I think that Robert could fucking kill it. And I would, like, Mrs. Vamp would be cussing me out because I would be dragging her by her arm, be like, "We gotta go. It's Robert Eggers during the Portrait of Dorian Gray, and I know that you think that I know you thought Nosferatu was a 6, but it's okay to be wrong because that was absolutely an 8. Like we gotta go and check this out." So that would definitely be a cool one, man, for sure. Because also, again, getting back to the movie and also just getting back to the cinematography as well as the Technicolor aspect. I love the way they intersplice the stuff from the book when it comes to like the murders and stuff like that. Like when Dorian Gray, kills his friend, it then goes back to the painting, which has already been shown as this ugly being. And now they're showing the blood on his hands from the murder that he's just done. But anyway, I love the idea of this movie. So anyway, and I love the execution. Now, and here's the thing: when it comes to the obituaries of this movie, it's a tough one for me for sure. I have always passionately loved this movie. I find this movie in my heart of hearts to be a solid 8. I think it's a really excellent cinematography movie. Again, when you talk, when we get back into how, Hurd Hatfield's portrayal of Dorian is, yeah, but that is a very traditional, 30s to 50s way of acting. So
Oh yeah.
I try, while it definitely has a little bit of that snobby, almost cheesy, comical, aristocratic portrayal, I do it. It's got accuracy to it as far as the acting portrayal of characters at that time. I do think the movie is a solid 8 personally, um, in my heart of hearts. If I'm looking at it, it's a little lower if I'm when I'm taking in Fangs and Infernos again in the common populace. So ultimately, I'm going to give this a 7.5 because again, I can be very passionate about a movie. And just like I said before, my Mount Rushmore of 10 out of 10s is probably not going to be somebody else's Mount Rushmore of 10 out of 10s. But again, you give me an hour to talk specifically about those movies, and I will go top to bottom on why I passionately feel that these movies are perfect. And so that's the thing. I personally am very fond of this movie, and I also do think that it has a lot to do with the fact that I saw this movie many years ago in school. It was actually shown in one of my classes, whether it was most likely English literature or something like that. But Angela Lansbury and Herd Hatfield's picture of Dorian Gray was shown to me at a very young age, um, in class, and I always attached on it. I loved it then. I vividly always remembered the sudden splicing of the Technicolor, and it always embedded itself in me. So I do have my own personal feelings and death grip on why this movie is so important to me in this way. But when I do take the common populace into everything, I can't knock it down a ton because I just don't have it in me. But I'll give it a 7.5 as what I still feel to be a quality film.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, when it comes to, like I said, to me, I mean, I love Angela Lansbury in this movie. To me, my favorite of hers, Company of Wolves. I love Company of Wolves. It's just
Yep.
but I mean, to me, like I said, I mean, as far as like I said, when it goes, like I said, I do feel like it is the better and the best version of this film from the adaptation of the book. Like I said, I remember loving the book because, like I said, I was just a huge fan of. I just loved just the story arc of it, and just like the interesting concept of, like, the picture and things like that, being able to stay young, and what you would do for, like, the what would be considered, like, fountain of youth, or or some, or immortality, or any of that kind of stuff. So like I said, I always found it interesting, like I said. So, but obviously with me now, I'm kind of weird. So I'm gonna tell you what I feel my score
Oh,
is, and then I will go and say that we're gonna meet in this, and we're gonna meet in the middle, because I don't want to go so low. So if you're giving it a 7.5, ideally I probably would give it maybe a 6.5, but I feel like 6.5 is way too
sure.
low for this film. I feel like it's too low, and I don't want to go with that. So I'm gonna bump my score up to a 7.5 or a 7.0. But in doing that, it's gonna be that middle, and the middle ground is that you have to come down to that 7.0.
Done.
It's just because, like I
No,
said, to
and
me,
that's fine,
like I
Devil.
said, to me, I don't think, like I said, I don't feel like it's a bad enough movie. But like I said, to me, if you're at a 7.5 and I don't like this film nearly as much as you, logistically, I should probably be a point lower than you. But I feel like 6.5 is too
Yeah,
low, because it is still such a good movie and a good version of this movie.
yeah,
So I have to go 7. And then, like I said, with us, no 2.5s, sometimes we like to
yeah.
go up, down, up, and down. I think with that one, I can't logistically give this a 7.5 and agree
Sure.
with that. So 7.0 has got to be that middle ground, where that way I don't go 6.5 and we would be
Yep.
at a 7.0.
Nope, 100% Devil. I'm definitely with you, man, and I super get it. And again, I make it very, very clear too that I was like, I have a lot of personal history with this
Yeah.
movie, where again, in my heart of hearts, it's even higher than that. But that's not reality. That's
Yeah.
not in proper film, breakdowns and debate like we do on this show and stuff like that. And again, we can have those different, like, ideas between, like, this movie where, like, no, to me this is right up here, and then the other person's like, it is absolutely not, and so on and so forth. So no, all good there, Devil. I'm definitely with you on that. So Fangs and Infernos, that is the way that it is going to be. It is going to be victory to the devil, as you guys might have figured out. But again, Bram Stoker's Dracula, we had already agreed. I mean, that movie is an epic execution of what film and movies should be: story, acting, storytelling, arc, and the ability, whether it's a burn or not, to be invested in the story. So, at a superior and very strong 9.0 victory again to the devil for as Bram Stoker's Dracula will take out 1945's Herd Hatfield. Jesus, I'm terrible with names with these old ones. Yes, Herd Hatfield and Angela Lansbury. 1945 is a picture of Dorian Gray at a solid 9.0 to a 7.0, and that is the way it shall ever be in here, our classic novels showdown. So that is the way it is going to be. And of course, shout out to all of our beloved partners and sponsors of the Vampire and Devil podcast. Shout out to Mark and Lizzie, of course, who are our merch store at rockandhorror.com when it comes to our merch. T-shirts, hoodies, hats, tanks. The Vampire and Devil collab category is where you're going to want to go, but make sure that you guys are following them on all of their socials because they're constantly running deals. Their deals also apply right in our merch store as well. So take advantage of that while you're checking out their stuff as well. And then, of course, John Kozik with the Salem Witchboard Museum and the Witchboard Museum of Baltimore. The Buffalo Bill House, owned by Chris in Perryopolis, Pennsylvania. It is an amazing Airbnb, a really, really great time. And also shout out to Chris with a lot of awesome opportunities that he's had that he has announced recently with movies like The Barn and stuff that have been filming at the Buffalo Bill House. So very, very cool. Constant opportunities coming his way and really, really cool things that have been taking place in that Buffalo Bill world. And then, of course, Brutalities, amazing flavors when it comes to all of the teas that they offer. And of course, a shout out to our buddies Chris and Saren at Twisted Vines. Amazing goth and horror decor, everything from homemade voodoo dolls, witch boards, jewelry, really, really cool things. So again, thank you so much for always checking us out. And that is the way it is going to be. Circling it back around when it comes to classic novelization. Bram Stoker's Dracula at a 9.0 takes out The Picture of Dorian Gray at a 7.0 with a devilish victory. We will see you guys real soon. Take care. Horns up. Fangs out.
Devil, my friend, I think it's time that we spill the tea. Brutalities. Vampire and Devil podcast couldn't be more excited, more humbled to let you all know that we have partnered with very dear friends of ours for a long time in Brutalities. And there's so much great stuff, so many flavors, so much to enjoy, and we're going to talk to you a little bit about it. Isn't that right there, my friend?
Oh yeah, we like it hot. Of course, the Inferno likes it hot. Do you like the hot tea? Well, you might as well get some Brutality. Yeah, horror movies, puns, rock and roll, Brutality's got it all.
Absolutely. When it comes to the vampire, you know that he's going to absolutely gravitate towards that Nosferatu or that Nosferatu brew. Absolutely a favorite of mine. And we got to show a little bit love to, by all means, the biggest franchise in horror right now. That would be Terrifier. So Brutalities has brought you Terrifier. But that's just from the vampire. The devil has some favorites of his own.
Oh yeah, do you like the movie Pumpkinhead? Well, how about a little pumpkin bread for your throat holes? And like I said, with the rock and roll fans and the horror fans, Wednesday 13 fans, do you like Wednesday 13 and tea? How about a couple of those? With the Summertime Suicide and a couple other ones too. So if you like Wednesday 13 and you like the tea and you like the Brutalities, go to the website.
Absolutely. And so, of course, we like to look out for those that look out for us. We love you, Fangs. We love you, Infernos. But as a courtesy from Brutalities to be bestowed on you, we have that Vampire and Devil coupon code, don't we, my friend?
Oh yeah, you want to save a little dough, little cheddar, maybe buy some more shit? Go on the line, Brutalities, type in Vampire and Devil, and you get 10% off your order. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. So it's getting into the chilly weather. People need to warm their bones. They need to warm what little skin they may or may not have. But Brutalities is the way to get it done. So that's the way it's going to be because Vampire and Devil said so. Horns up, fangs out for Brutalities. All right there, Fangs and Infernos. Let's come at you with a brand new coffin nail, shall we? And this is going to be kind of an interesting one because this is like a throwback to a current, to a discussion piece by me. And since I don't actually have a physical copy of this movie, because I don't actually think a physical copy of this particular movie exists quite yet, we're gonna go with my old school, really awesome, like VHS copy version to show off of the original Nosferatu from 1922. But here's the thing, this one's from 2023. This is a retelling, kind of a remake of that classic Nosferatu, actually starring Doug Jones, who myself and Devil, as you may already know, have met in person not that long ago. He and I actually went over to Horror on Main, where Doug was at. He was great. He signed a bunch of stuff, and I'm having a little bit of buyer's remorse that I had him sign my Hocus Pocus. Not that I had a problem with him signing my Hocus Pocus, because everybody knows that I'm a super fan of that, but that he was selling large posters of that Nosferatu movie that he did. That's where my buyer's remorse comes in, because man, that would have been bitchin' to have. Anyway, back on point, let's talk a little bit about the movie. So when it does come to it, it's a really, really well done movie, shot relatively scene for scene. It's pretty much telling the story as described, as expected, as executed before. But it is in color. It does have vocals, so you do actually hear it. It's not a silent film. But overall, I really do like it. I think it's well done. I think it's well acted. For a little bit down in my feels, I love the fact that the Romanian doctor that's in that movie is a surprise appearance by Aurelio Voltaire, so I definitely love that. But overall, I really do like Doug's portrayal of Nosferatu. I think he fits the look, fits the style, and overall, the thing about Doug, as you guys know, is as a character creature actor, he literally is the guy. He's incredibly great at what he does. But anyway, I love the fact that this movie is very, very traditional. I'm a big fan of the fact that it does take certain liberties, so that this movie with this director and this screenplay does stay with its own style and execution. You know, it's not just frame for frame, for word, a complete like remake of the original, because that's kind of pointless. But overall, I'm going to go high on this one. I really like it at a solid 7.5 for 2023's Nosferatu. Ghouls and Fangs, Vampire and the Devil here. We got a little question for you. Devil, there's kind of a triangle, a three-headed monster per se, when it comes to Baltimore, that I don't think people necessarily realize. We've got Edgar Allan Poe, we've got John Waters, but what else do we have?
We got the Ouija boards, oh yeah.
Absolutely. Starting in Baltimore way back in the day, a lot of people are unfamiliar with William Fuld and Elijah Bond, who patented, and the birth of the Ouija board was right here in Baltimore. Devil and Vampire coming at you from the Witchboard Museum of Baltimore, courtesy of our friend John Kozik, who invited us out to check it out and shoot a little conversation action to let you guys all know. Of course, you've seen on our socials that we have partnered with both museums, and we couldn't be more appreciative to John for that opportunity. So whenever you're here in Baltimore, of course, right attached to the Bazaar Oddity Shop off of the Avenue, you have Witchboard Museum Baltimore. And when you're in Witch City, USA, up in Salem, Massachusetts, that's when you get to visit the Salem Witchboard Museum.
Oh yeah, if you want to see some cool stuff, see some cool boards, get some cool history, go see our boy John. Man, that guy is really awesome, man. That dude knows his boards, he knows his history, he's about preserving the society of witch boards and the talking boards and all that goodness. And you know, we love it. We love the fact that, you know, they were gonna bring in this museum here in Baltimore, so all the Baltimore fans or all your East Coast fans or maybe not as far away, going up to Salem, come out to Baltimore and check it out, you know what I mean? Because there's some cool stuff in this museum, and you gotta check it out, because the devil and the vampire said so.
That is facts right there, my friend. Again, absolutely attached to the Bazaar Oddities Shop in the Avenue in Hamden for the Baltimore established Witchboard Museum, or off of Essex Street in Salem, Massachusetts for the Salem Witchboard Museum. Horns up, fangs out.